Well, voters in the Empire State of New York on Tuesday easily approved two constitutional amendments. New York voters kept upstate county executives in office while flipping several mayoral seats. Democrats gained ground in the county, holding the state's fourth largest city, while Republicans continued a years-long march and a takeover of Long Island. Many are wondering about the role of redistricting and how it plays out in state politics. Redistricting is a never-ending story in New York and a lot of other places, too. Both sides of the political fight over drawing congressional district lines ahead of the 2024 elections. Well, Democrats were stopped cold by the State Court of Appeals last year when they violated the state constitution by enacting an extreme partisan gerrymander. Despite being caught red-handed, Democrats are back in court again, contending that the maps ordered by the courts were only for 2022 and that the state legislature should get another shot to redraw the lines in their favor. The whole thing is a mess and quite confusing, so here to help me understand, and you too, Bobbie Anne Cox. Bobbie, good to see you.
Yes, thanks for having me on, Steve. Nice to see you again.
We talked about this in the break. The Democrats are nothing if not relentless. They don't give up. They just keep coming back, hoping that the next time in court they'll win. The next time in court they'll win. It is one place that Republicans get outgamed oftentimes. But what is the situation currently with the districts in the state of New York?
Yeah, so you know what? Last year, as you mentioned, we did have a lawsuit that went on here in New York between the Democrats and the Republicans over redistricting. And that case was ultimately decided in favor of the Constitution, in favor of the Republicans. In essence, our highest court in New York State, the Court of Appeals, last year had ruled that the maps that were drawn by the legislature, which is supermajority Democrat here in New York State, were unconstitutional. They didn't follow the correct procedure, and therefore those maps were struck down. A special master was appointed by the court last year to draw the maps, and that's exactly what happened. A special master appointed by the Court of Appeals drew the maps. We had the 2022 elections, and the result was that we had very competitive races here in New York State, something we haven't seen in many years. And ultimately, the Republicans ended up picking up 5 seats in the House of Representatives. And as you know, the House of Representatives is now controlled by the Republicans, while the federal Senate, the U.S. Senate, is controlled by the Democrats. So this is apparently a problem for the politicians in Albany because the Democrats have now come back and started a lawsuit to try to claim that those maps that were drawn last year for the 2022 election were only for the 2022 election, and they're trying to go back to the drawing board now and redraw the maps again for the congressional races that are coming up next year in 2024. But you know what? That argument, Steve, is completely unconstitutional in itself, because our Constitution in New York State is very clear that the maps are drawn. We have a census every 10 years. The maps are drawn. Redistricting occurs in accordance with the results of that census. And those maps are supposed to stay for 10 years. And then when we have the next census, we do another redistricting and the lines are redrawn then. You're not supposed to redraw the lines in the middle of that 10-year period. But yet here we are in New York State seeing a court battle.
So if you can't redraw them, why do they think they can redraw them? I mean, honestly, here's the rules. You can't do this. You can't run out of bounds and come back and score a touchdown. If you're out of bounds, you're out of bounds, play is over. I mean, I hate to use a football analogy, but it really is that simple. You're out of bounds, play is over, you're done there, but yet here they come again. No, the play is still going. How do we end up there?
Yeah, you know, the really upsetting thing here is that the will of the people is not being followed. And, you know, I'm heading up an organization called Stop NY Corruption. And our website, if anybody wants to check it out, I encourage them to please do so. It's stopnycorruption.com. And basically, the whole point of this organization is to raise awareness about what is going on in Albany. Most voters do not know what's going on, and you need to be an informed voter. But let me tell you, you know, the voters of New York State in 2014 put into place a constitutional amendment to change the way that the maps were drawn. We didn't want our New York State legislature drawing these maps because we didn't want partisan maps. We wanted to not have any sort of issues with gerrymandering, and we wanted to have it done independently. We wanted both sides of the aisle, so to speak, to be drawing these maps. So we created and put into our Constitution a requirement that an independent redistricting commission draw the maps. That's the IRC. That's who's supposed to draw the maps. And then ultimately, the New York State legislature will approve the maps that are drawn by the IRC. But that IRC commission is supposed to be, half of them are Democrat, half of them are Republican. So it's supposed to produce maps that are fair and equal. But that is not what happened. The legislature, the corrupt Albany politicians, stepped in and created the maps. Since the IRC couldn't come to a resolution, they just stepped right in, created the maps. And, ultimately there was a lawsuit last year. And those are the maps that got struck down, the ones that were created by the supermajority Democrat legislature in New York State. The Court of Appeals said
the legislature is not even supposed to make the maps. The legislature is not even supposed to make the maps because you have a commission to do that as approved. It's just the rules just don't apply to some people, Bobbie Anne. The rules just don't apply. You know that. Where do you think it's going to go? Read the tea leaves a little bit. I'll give you the last word.
Yes, so we do have this court case now that is in front of the Court of Appeals here in New York State, our highest court. And this is a crucial case. They're having oral arguments next week, November 15th. People can watch those oral arguments live stream actually on our website, stopnycorruption.com. We are going to live stream the oral arguments in front of the state's highest court. I have confidence that the Court of Appeals is going to rule in favor of the Constitution. That court is a constitutional court, and traditionally speaking, the Court of Appeals has upheld and enforced our Constitution here in New York State. So I do have confidence that they're going to strike down this lawsuit. They're going to say, no, we are not going back to the drawing board. We are not going to redraw the maps again now for 2024. I do have confidence that they're going to follow the provisions as laid out in the Constitution. But nonetheless, it is very important that not just New Yorkers, but Americans in general understand what's going on, because this is the will of the people that's being challenged. This is the will of the people that's being overridden by, power-hungry politicians.
It's rigged all the time, isn't it? They can't help it. They got big fat thumbs. And they want them on the scales all the time. Bobbie Anne, always appreciate you being here. Come back when we've got an update, if you would, please.
Yes, thank you for having me, Steve.
Always appreciate it. New York. New York. All right, coming up after the break, the Massachusetts U.S. Attorney's Office arrested 3 men for operating a sophisticated high-end brothel, a whole network in Boston and Virginia. And the client list is getting some attention. I'll tell you why after the break on ABL.